Good morning and welcome to today's XBOSoft webinar, Are You Making the 7 Testing Metric Mistakes? Quality Assurance Manager Mark Bentsen from ARGO Data will cover these common mistakes and what to do if you are making them. This webinar is presented by us at XBOSoft. We are a software testing and quality assurance company dedicated to speeding products to market and ensuring improved software quality and performance through our QA consulting and software testing expertise. Founded in 2006, we're an American company with a global team and offices in San Francisco, Beijing, and Amsterdam. Today's house rules are as follows. All participants will be in listen-only mode. If you have any questions, we do encourage you to use the panel on the right side of your screen or post them to Twitter by tagging us at XBOSoft and using hashtags XBOSoftWebinar and testing metric mistakes. We will try to answer those questions at the end of the webinar, but if we run out of time, we will answer them through the XBOSoft blog. As always, we will record this webinar, so we'll send you the link when we've concluded. I'm Marketing and PR Manager Rachel Geibig, and I'd like to introduce you to Phil Liu, CEO and founder, who will tell you more about Mark Bentsen.
Thanks, Rachel. Today is not really about me. It's about software testing metrics. And so I'm just going to go forward and introduce our guest speaker here. We're really glad to have Mark Bentsen. I met Mark about 4 or 5 years ago at a software testing conference in Florida. Is that right, Mark?
Yeah, that's the place.
Yeah, seems like an ages ago. And I guess about 5 years ago, we've been talking about software quality ever since. At the time, you were with another company, but now you're with ARGO Data. What's your role at ARGO Data, Mark?
I am the QA manager of our functional testing team. And at ARGO Data, we have software development that supports mission-critical and analytical software, mainly that does payment processing at banks, sales and service relationship management, and types of lending. We also have products for fraud and healthcare solutions, and we get to support all that on the software quality side of things.
Wow, that sounds like a pretty big responsibility. And as far as gauging how you're doing, I would assume that you have to use a lot of metrics, which is really the reason why we invited you here. We're really happy to have you here talk about how you use metrics and, more importantly, how you can avoid some of the big common mistakes with using metrics. So I'll just let you take it away here. I'm going to turn over the keyboard and mouse to you and let you do your thing and tell us about some of the mistakes that hopefully we can avoid.
All right. Well, thank you, Phil, and I'm looking forward to today's session. The first question that I want to ask everyone is there ever TMI in testing? So too much information. And I would say no, there really isn't. However, what you can do is give too much data. When you're just throwing numbers and figures at business people and you start to see that glazed over look in their eye, you know that you're not giving them information. What they're getting is something else, and they're starting to check out. And I'm looking forward to being able to discuss this today in a way that will make sense and be actionable for all of our participants. So you ready to get started?
I'm ready.
All right. All right. If you're ready, I'm ready. So before we get into the 7, I want to just sort of set the stage and say, what is it that we do as QA leaders, as people that work in software quality, as individuals who provide some sort of assurance for others on the state of quality? And I've found that people can have a very difficult time articulating in a simple way, what do we do when it comes to QA? And I would say we reduce risk and eliminate waste. Now, okay, what does that mean? Well, when it comes to software testing teams, pretty much all software testing teams do these 4 things. We build confidence. Every time you run a test case and it has the expected result, that's 1 tick on your confidence going up. We reduce risks and surprises. So when we are able to test against risks, when we're able to find things that would otherwise be discovered out in the wild by customers with wallets, and we're able to either be aware of it or ideally fix and prevent it from going out, then that's 1 less surprise that the company has to deal with. We also, obviously, in this sort of work, detect defects. And everyone likes it when we detect the bad ones earlier than later. And for this session right here, we're going to talk about the last item, provide valuable information. So we'll dive into that. Now, this is effective software testing teams. I'm the manager of quality assurance. A lot of what we do is testing, but what do software quality assurance teams do that's different than software testing teams? And I would say that if you find yourself spending more than half of your time in your organization doing these things, then you really are a QA team more than a software testing team. And that's where you're identifying risks. You're not just detecting defects, but you're preventing them. And you're focusing on continuous improvement of the quality of the software development lifecycle. That could be requirements quality, that could be ensuring that code reviews are done correctly. Whatever the case may be, you're continuously improving the SDLC. And one thing that was ingrained in me as I was coming up through the different roles in QA is that our job ultimately was to guard the company brand. So again, what I wanted to do is just sort of put a framework in place on what is our role. And this webinar is going to be very much about providing valuable information. Okay, step 0, communication. Ultimately, when you're providing information, you're communicating. And keep in mind that communication is what the listener does. Our goal is to build confidence that whoever we're communicating to upward is not like their involvement is not needed unless we request it directly. We want to be able to communicate in a way where we say, okay, it's rough, it's complicated, we got it. You can have confidence that we're working together, we know what the issues are, and we're working through them. Rather than crying wolf, and not really having a good sense of, these are the things that are big problems, and dragging executives or C-suite people into the scrum unnecessarily. So the content is really going to vary depending upon your audience. You have to ask yourself, who do I communicate to? Think of the past 2 weeks. Who have you told about the status of your work? Is it your team, some other cross-functional team, managers out there, directors, officers of the company? Understanding who that audience is and specifically what they care about is critical when you have a lens that says, okay, communication, that's what the listener does. I need to be able to speak their language. In addition to that, you've got to build confidence. You've got to be concise, accurate, and make them trust you with what you communicate. Start with less, but make sure you've asked the right questions that anticipating what they're going to want to know, and that you already have answers for those. So I would, with that kind of starting framework, let's get into just some rules of thumb when it comes to communication. Now, a lot of people that joined have probably thought that when I'm communicating metrics or status that really that's got one communication channel, and that's I create some sort of report and I send it in email. Not true. Not true at all. And if you depend on email as your only, mechanism for the way that you send out metrics, you're really, really limiting your ability to have powerful communication across the organization. You want to have more tools inside your communication tool belt to be able to reach as many people as possible. So part of the communication heuristics or rules of thumb would be make sure that you know what your headline is. When you read a newspaper or a magazine article, it just doesn't start out with a body of text. Newspaper articles have a headline and usually some sort of subtext to catch your attention. You can also learn from them on what's the other types of format that they use to drive home important points. Commonly, if I'm reading a magazine or something on Flipboard or whatever the case is, there'll be a sentence that's blocked out as if an image would be there, but it's some key idea or something from the article, something that draw me in, and they're grabbing my attention. All of those mediums, and as they evolve over time, pay attention to that and think of it in the way that you communicate.
It's interesting, Mark. Let me interrupt you for a second here. So if you're sending out your, I guess you could say, weekly report, which has metrics, and so you might change the title, the email subject of your weekly report each week, depending on what you may want to highlight in that report.
Yeah, I would either.
Because I've seen a lot, where you say it says weekly report or something boring and just delete it, right?
Yeah, people are just kind of recycling things, and then it just becomes one more thing to ignore. But
right.
part of preparing slides is you want to basically pull out an important point, or if you're making a statement or drawing a conclusion, wham, hit them with that, and then support it with your numbers, with your information, and make it okay, yeah, you're right. We do have this particular issue, but make that your headline. I'm gonna use an example right now where there was a particular project where we had a very high ratio of defects that was it was our net meant that we were tracking, are we closing more defects than finding? And essentially what was happening was we were up to a number 7, and that meant that for every defect that development was closing, we were opening 7. And we were getting close to a point inside of the project schedule where we figured we'd be winding down. And this metric was kind of at red, but it was so far over the top. I wanted to get the test manager in, and I said, look, Mary, we have to get everybody understanding the same thing. You need to know what your headline is. And you need to get everybody on the whole team saying it and understanding it. And that headline was, we have to get to a place where we're closing more defects than we're opening. We have to get to a place where we're closing more defects than we're opening. And we started to say that at every opportunity that we had, and people understood, oh, we got to close more defects. Well, we were also saying we need more developers involved. We need, additional resources to do this, that, and the other thing to accomplish it. But everyone had to understand that this particular metric had a ramification, and it required action, and immediate action, in order to shift that metric and get the project turned around. So that's an example of a headline where you have all these numbers underneath it, but unless you go, well, what is the conclusion? And it's simple to understand and tell other people about, then you kind of miss it if you're just sending out an email that's got set, the net defect trend is 7. Okay, well, that doesn't really make me leap up and start doing things to address a problem.
Right. That's a good example, Mark. Thanks.
So a couple other areas where you can communicate this headline is something I call big game hunting. Now, big game hunting happens after meetings. If there are key people that need to understand information that you have, well, those people go to meetings. They might be hard to get, they might be very quick to respond to your email or whatever the case is, but trust me, you're either in meetings with them or they go to meetings, and meetings end, and when they do, people are available. You can get people's attention, and that's just like what I call big game hunting. You can use it wisely. The other one is you're going to find yourself in elevators with people. Make sure that whatever your status is, know your headline and be able to communicate it and be able to kind of like take the elevator challenge, all right? Start at the ground floor of your building, take the elevator to wherever your office is, and make sure in that amount of time you can tell somebody your headline and that they understand what action they need to take. If you have that elevator status down, then wherever you see them, you can make sure that you can communicate it. Another one I like is what I call kung fu reporting. I get calls all the time from people, and they, typically they want something. Well, there's a list of people that I know if they are trying to track me down and they get me on the phone, I know certain information that they need to take action on. They may not be paying attention to their email because they're getting a lot of it, but if they call me about something, I'll listen, but before we hang up, I make sure that you take it and you turn it to where you're communicating something very key to them. And I've found that to be very powerful as well. Now, when you do send an email, make sure it's relevant. Make sure that you know where or kind of like when meetings occur, where people need your information, and you've got to send it before that meeting. Talk to the project managers and ask them when they begin to prepare their reports. Normally they'll do it like 6 hours or 8 hours before they send it out. When you see them send it, that's the wrong time to send your information like 10 minutes before. You want to have a sense of when they start rolling up their data and ensure that they've got your details while they begin that process. It'll make it easier for them, and you can ensure that your information is going to be included along with the other project information. And I think that's probably enough to get us started. Bill, you ready to jump into the 7?
I'm ready. I think the first one that you just talked about was about in terms of the communication. That's probably the opposite of the mistakes, right? That's something that I think that really helps, that people really don't even think about in terms of what's being important. Probably one of the most important things about communicating the metrics, actually the information. So let's move on to the mistakes. Number 1 or number 7?
Well, we'll get to number 1. Okay. So this guy right here, the number 1 metric mistake that I want to talk about, I call flash in the pan. And this is really where, you just have too much. You're too ambitious in the beginning. And you can see this, that the symptoms are the person who's trying to send this out is just having trouble keeping up with the metrics, that they wind up being stale. Keeping them current is very, very difficult. They're sort of a slave to the report or whatever the case is. And the principle here is really that going slow, being judicious, that is fast in the big scheme of things. And it really requires you to not paint yourself in a corner by saying, okay, we need all this stuff, but to make a sustainable decision up front and say, what are the key things that we need, and then try to scale back even from that, because you can always add to it, but don't just grab everything that you've seen up till that point and try to include it in your next testing effort, because what will happen is you'll get, that sort of ambition will get you in this trouble where eventually you won't be able to keep your reports current. And then it's just a drumbeat. You just steadily keep reporting meaningful information. And you really want to keep an eye in this one with what I call double is trouble. And I've seen where, and have been guilty of this, we'll be reporting metrics on like 3 different metrics that are really measuring the same thing. They're just kind of rolled up differently. And the deal is you want to be consistent, and you want to make sure that whatever that metric is, it's important to people. And so as long as you have a tight, lean number of metrics that you understand and are able to communicate those in a current way, you're able to stay out of the flash in the pan mistake. Ready for number 2, Phil?
I think I'm ready. Flash in the pan was good, though.
Okay, so get out your barbells, because the next one is heavy lifting. And I see this a lot. Choosing to work hard instead of smart. So this is when you've got some sort of a process that is very, very manual. And you find that not only is it manually intensive, which makes it a lot of work, but also prone to making errors, fat fingering information, and then you lose your credibility. And again, kind of going back to maintainability, your ability to build trust and your ability to make sure that the processes that you've got in place are ones that you can continue report after report to support will rely on not doing everything manually. Having some sort of automated mechanism, some sort of telemetry built into your reporting so that wherever you're grabbing your numbers from, it's going to basically do a lot of that work of pulling it into, this measurement and this measurement are pulled into a specific metric by the system. That will help you out tremendously. And if you can't automate everything to where you get your final report, there's another mechanism in automation that I really like, just the concept of automation assist. If you look at, okay, we have 6 steps we have to go through, but 3 of those in the middle we could automate. Do that. That'll help you out. You'll be thankful down the road when you're on some sort of tight schedule or you're rolling up a lot of complicated, detailed information that you have that telemetry built into your mechanism. Be smart, and if you don't have to work hard pulling things across systems, don't let computers do that for you. All right, I'm ready for number 3.
And the telemetry one, that's kind of a tough one. A lot of people end up using spreadsheets. Isn't that right, Mark?
Yeah, I do see that. I even see, we have a bit of this at ARGO as well, where rather than using the native reporting inside of our test management tool, we'll export it and then put it into Excel. Then our Excel sheet has a tremendous amount of just a lot of formulas and everything in there. And so we can break the formulas, but as long as we don't break those formulas, then it really, really helps us out. And that's the mechanism that we use. Again, you just kind of have to look at all the different steps that are required and say, well, which of these could we possibly automate? Or is there some sort of natural reporting inside of our high-priced test management system that can, we can adopt that report and support it with strong text, a good narrative on top of whatever the number is to really drive home the story that this metric has.
Okay.
You ready for number 3?
I think I'm ready.
All right, if you're ready, I'm ready. Okay, I call this message in a bottle. Now, think about this. If you're sending out via email your status a couple times a week, weekly, daily, whatever it is, and no one writes you back with questions or some sort of response to, I understand this and I'll be doing that, if you basically are sending it out and don't hear anything back, this is the problem. And what you're doing is you're communicating out into the void, and whatever it is that people need or the action that they should take from the information that you should be providing, they're missing it. They don't know what to do, or they don't care about the status, and they should. And if you're reporting information that they don't care about, you should probably be finding something that they do care about and making sure that you're testing and finding out significant unknowns about that, and give the business, give decision makers the ability to better do their job from the work that we do in testing. Again, this goes back to my step 0. Communication is what the listener does, and you want to make sure that people understand what your understand what your message is, as well as what they need to do about it from your perspective.
Yeah, I think this could actually go back to the headline, right? I mean, that's why people don't open your status reports. Maybe your headline is not the right headline for them.
Yeah, and if for people that send out a report and it's just an attachment, like status is attached, lots of business people never open attachments. And if you don't have your message that you're trying to deliver in the body of the email where people are going to be able to see it in a kind of unavoidable way, and it's probably the top 3 or 4 lines, then what will happen is you'll lose your message. People having the habit of not opening attachments or not liking to see scrolling emails or whatever the case may be. So I'm going to introduce a kind of an unusual solution for this, and it is simply know your audience. You've got to know what they care about, and you've got to be able to provide information that meets their need to know about these things. And the actionable way to address this is my direct reports right now. I have them on this assignment where I've asked them to go and talk to our internal customers and ask them 3 questions. So they've been going week over week and talking to, development leads, project managers, directors, various people across the organization, and asking them these 3 questions. What do you need and want from QA? How well are we meeting your needs? And what is your perception of the QA team? Tell me the truth. And to just informally sit down and listen, not to argue, just to hear what our customers, the people that consume what we provide when it comes to information, what do they want? What do they need? And are we able to provide that through our work, and then explaining the outcome of our work and our status? And that exercise is designed so that when it comes to communication, we're on target. We know our audience. We know what they care about. We know our message, and we connect those dots. That's number 3.
That's interesting. That's interesting because I think that sometimes people don't know what they want from QA.
Do you
ever get that? I'm sure you do get that a lot.
When I have gone out and done this, I have always learned so much. And sometimes what people want from QA is either us to jump over tall buildings and do the impossible, or it seems very different than what I would say is the role and responsibility of a software testing or QA organization. But nonetheless, they're our customers, and I've never gone to somebody and said, what do you need and want from QA? How well are we meeting your needs? What is your perception of the QA team? And had them go, I don't know. I always get these, like, my 30-minute meeting could easily go an hour and a half, because they will find a soapbox somewhere and just start going through all of this kind of pent-up energy on what they need to be successable. And I've learned so much going through this personally, and it's been exciting watching my direct reports as they go out and spend time with our internal customers.
Yeah, I guess probably a better way to talk about this was that, when you ask this question, originally they may not know, but actually when they verbalize it, they start to crystallize what they really want from QA.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, I have seen that, where people can be sort of, they know they don't like something, but they're not able to articulate it. And this exercise, if you will, that we are managing affirmatively helps them say out loud what they need, what they want, and then address the needs part of it in a way that we can come to some sort of agreement that we're doing a good job within the laws of gravity to satisfy their needs so that they can be successful, our project can be successful, our company can be successful.
Right. Cool. All right, so we're moving on to the number 4.
All right, number 4. Okay. Number 4 is House on Fire. Okay. If you're operating in this kind of like ongoing state of emergency, then you know that you're suffering from this metric mistake. And the situation is that poor reporting and insight into QA processes, by not really reporting on every part of the process of what we do in QA. So if you just report test execution, which is kind of the tail end of things, then it's likely that you deal with a lot of unplanned work and emergencies. You want to make sure that you can manage affirmatively our role and maybe even more upstream roles across the software development lifecycle. What's the status of the requirements, and are we able to measure the requirements quality? And they're maturing into some sort of level of quality where development should start working from them, we should start working from them. When we start writing test cases, what is the progress of writing either the design of those test cases, down into the detail and the procedures of the test cases, or more importantly, don't make the assumption that the test cases themselves, once the person who wrote them finished, that they're ready. Because you know what? They're not. Until somebody who's got a greater level of expertise has had ample time to review them and endorse, kind of give them their blessing, and you're tracking that, the approval after a good formal review of our testware. If you're not measuring, are people reviewing them? Are they giving us some sort of quality rating on the work that we intend to do? You really don't know the state of the test cases. So then you have them, and then let's say you've got the test environment. Well, have you done any work to ensure that the test environment is ready for you to start executing test cases in? Or on day one, when you have your test environment, are you just assuming, yeah, the environment's going to be good to go? And if you're not like measuring the environment's ready, we have a mechanism to check and basically say, yes, this playing field that we're about to, do combat on, or this playing field that we are going to be doing all our work on is ready for that to happen before we start that work, then you're really putting a lot of risk into your testing process. Then you start executing test cases. And if you don't know where you are supposed to be in the execution of those test cases, doing other types of either functional or non-functional testing based on expertise or specified tests, if you're not measuring that and have a good sense of where you need to be 2 weeks from Tuesday, then you're really just trying to rush through as fast as you can. You don't know if you're on pace or off pace. So all that to say, if the only thing you're measuring is, well, we have 100 test cases, it's Monday, let's start running them, and then emergencies start popping up left, right, and center, don't be surprised because you haven't had eyes on and been looking into other pieces of the SDLC where we have a critical role. And when it is game day and we start executing the first test case, it depends upon the quality of all that prior work. And if you haven't been measuring it and have a good sense of whether it was done correctly, then you're making a big gamble on the first day that you start your test execution. So ultimately, you want to be able to remove the mystery of what's happening everywhere that we're either doing our work in software testing or depending upon the work of others, like what's the state of the requirements when it comes to requirements quality? Do we know? Do we have a way of measuring it? Do we have somebody we can ask to say, yeah, these requirements are good, or, well, these requirements got rushed, or whatever the case is. All of that helps get us out of this sort of house on fire situation.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of good metrics there, Mark. Kind of offhand, in terms of the whole process, in terms of like requirements quality and test case quality, and test environments being ready and so forth. I think a lot of people don't even really think of these as measurements that are critical in QA to actually get ready for testing. I think people just think about test case execution and don't really think about all these other things that are important parts of the game plan.
Yeah, I agree. I see a lot of people that just measure that they measure the things that others tell them that they need to measure rather than what they should be measuring in order to be set up for success for that piece of the project where others are saying, okay, tell us your status. Basically, when are you going to be done? And have you found anything bad?
Right.
But there's a lot of work that happens before you get into that part of the project where people are asking you, when are you going to be done? Is anything bad out there? And if you're not measuring that, it's likely that you're going to be dealing with a lot of emergencies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on your next slide, you talk about a solution in terms of having the meaningful metrics. A lot of our clients are really concerned about automation percentages as well, and I'm not sure it's really that meaningful. Can you, in your experience, what do you think about automation percentage in terms of test cases being automated? Is that an important metric for you to measure?
Well, I think that it's built upon some other fundamentals, like, well, what is the what's being tested by the automation? And, if it's just numbers for numbers' sake, well, that gets you in a lot of trouble. And I have lived that, inheriting organizations where it's like, well, we're going to do 600. Oh, are you sure that's enough? Well, okay, we'll do 800. I don't know. Okay, we'll do 1,000. It's like, oh my gosh, and automation's the same way. It's like, well, what is this automation evaluating? Because when it comes down to it, all automation is really going to do is change detection, right? So was something different than the last time that the automation ran, and your ability to look at a broad set of functionality typically and say it is, meeting its expected results based upon what we know, and yeah, you know what? Let's wait until another I think it's number 6, and
Okay.
I'll have some content that should do a good job of answering it, and if not, we'll pick this up at the end, because I don't want to wrap this
Okay.
up for
Yeah.
a bunch of time.
Sorry to slow you down.
Yeah.
Let's move on to number 5.
All right.
Woohoo.
Let's move on to number 5. Okay, so number 5 is mine goes to 11. This is my nod to Spinal Tap, and this is like, all right, things are so complex, and then by that being cumbersome, that it's almost like I'm going to tell you all this very sophisticated stuff in my metrics, and because you don't understand it, you're just going to have to trust me, whether you like it or not. And it's one of those situations where if people are getting your reports and they really can't, like, it's not meaningful to them in the sense that I don't even know what this means, and I definitely don't know the implications, then this is the metric mistake that's being made. If the person who's sending out the report doesn't understand it, this is the metric mistake. I tell our people, our metrics, they're for you. You need to know what is the state of the quality of the application so that you can then tell other people what they need to know. You can answer questions that might not be in our metrics. But if the way that we're measuring our testing process, what we're finding out through it, doesn't make sense to you, then we've got to tweak that a little bit so that you're able to look at it and understand, yeah, we need to make adjustments. I have never seen a test plan. I have never seen a successful project follow the test plan. I've seen a lot of unsuccessful projects follow the test plan and like the original test plan, but the successful projects that I've seen have required a little bit of adjustment on the testing side, on the development side, as things are learned through the testing process, whether that be adding a little bit more time, testing some functionality more rigorously than was intended, deciding not to test certain things that upon inspection appeared to be very stable and high quality, and not, choosing not to eat up an extra week or weeks, but to spend that time and those resources doing other things that required them. And so if you aren't able to look at the metrics, the information that's coming out of the testing process, and make those adjustments, then it's unlikely that you'll have a successful project. It's likely that your exit criteria is going to be, well, we hit the date, we can't do anymore, we got to ship, or we ran out of money, we got to, we're done, versus being able to slowly make adjustments, early and often that are required to support success criteria for the project. Really, the principle here is keep it simple. And I would tell you that you can measure anything, all right? We had somebody come in and do some communication work with us, and he talked about, he called it the gate guard example. And it was where this person had been put into a job where they were the manager of people that had physical security of the building. And in the performance cycle, he would have to go and say, well, this person is meets expectation, this person exceeds expectation, but the culture required metrics, and he did not have a good he couldn't figure out, how do I have metrics for gate guards? And he really struggled with that because he knew that he couldn't get either promotions or raises or other things through the performance management system without coming in and having metrics. So he talks to this person that came in and facilitated this thing for us, and he says, look, what do I do? And he's like, well, you can measure anything. Tell me about their job. How do you know that they're good? And he said, well, essentially, when they were doing their job really well, he could tell because the people that were driving up in their cars would smile. And the recommendation was, well, this is what you do. You observe them, and then over a block of time, for every single car that drives up, you measure how many smiles do you get and how many do you not get. And that'll give you a sense of what your customer satisfaction is from your gate guards. So this story is just out there to get you to think about, you can have very creative ways to measure anything. But it's incumbent upon you to look at it from a perspective that, well, it's not something that may require some sort of like complex formula in Excel. It just requires you to think about, how can I look into something and know this person and their performance, how are we able to measure it in a meaningful way that I can then communicate out? How can I look at this process in our software testing and evaluate it in a way that we can make sense out of it and say we're either doing good, we could do better, we're at a place where this is not where we should be focusing improvement. Whatever the case is, you want to have a creative mind, an approach to looking at things and saying, I want to be able to measure this in a meaningful way and come out and be able to tell that story to whoever it is that wants to know about it.
That's really interesting, the smiles measurement. I would imagine as a QA manager, if you wanted to know how your organization was seen in the company, if you just walked around and you took a sample of 10 or 20 people to see how many people smiled at you, that would tell you the answer.
Yeah. But, you know, the story that I told about, you know, my direct reports going and talking to our internal customers, that has really been, it's been exciting for me to listen to what they've learned going through that and asking, what's your perception of QA? Tell me the truth. And just listening. That's really, really been, I think, very helpful for them to get just a sense of, are our customers smiling or not?
Yeah, they may also learn that they could be focusing on the wrong things or have different assumptions about what's important and what's not.
Yeah, definitely. All right, I'm ready to go to six.
Number 6. All right.
Okay. Fish out of water. So on this one, I alluded to it. It's and this is where I'm going to touch on the automation thing you brought up, Phil. You're answering the wrong questions. And the symptom here is you get kind of in this rut of, this is the way we've always done it. That's sort of a mentality. And you really do need to know your audience. I think that today, the questions that executives are asking, I believe personally, they're outdated. And those types of questions that the C-suite people and other executives that I tend to report to are the types of things like, how many test cases did you run? How many are automated? How many bugs did you find? And that type of question. And the type of answer they get back, I don't know that it's terribly helpful for them. So this is where I'm saying you need to think about it differently. You need to take the initiative to answer questions that maybe are things that they have never asked before, but the answers that you're able to provide through answering these types of questions will be extremely helpful to the executives. I think that, you know, I'm sure in your career in QA, you've learned that you just can't cover everything. You've got to know what is important for you. Is it looking at performance or some sort of core functionality? You know, what didn't QA test? What are the limitations of our testing? Are there things that you are afraid of? And that type of information can be very, very helpful. Think of it in terms of if you had more time, would it help out, you know? And just be able to have some common sense when it comes to your own personal perspective so that you can relay that to other people. When you're reporting, I think that you want to be able to report with, you know, when it comes down to time to release, you want to be able to make that digital. You want to say yes. You want to say no. Not like, let me tell you this, that, and the other thing, but I'm afraid to say whether we should release or not. So I would say, yes, we're ready to release now, or no, we're not. Some sort of reality check. I think we're, you know, this is what I'm concerned about. Maybe a little bit deeper dive on various features and what the state of their quality is. Having something that would be a number that can reflect how your time was compressed is also very helpful. You're never going to get whatever days you requested up front, unless, you know, that's just my experience. We're going to ask for this, and we're going to get, you know, that minus something, and you want to be able to communicate that and make it into a risk sort of metric as well. So, for example, we only had 10 of the 15 days, so that would be a 0.67 compression in the schedule for testing, and that means that the risk is high. And you just have to think of it in terms of if you had calculated that with 1 tank of gas, I can drive from San Francisco to Petaluma. Well, if I start with 2/3 a tank of gas, don't expect to make it, right? You've got to have a way of explaining that. And then go a bit deeper with some sort of coverage that you do in your regression, and think of a map that, you know, that can be very helpful in explaining what you did get to cover and what you didn't. And yeah, so this would look like, yes, I'm a go for release. My areas for concern are X, Y, and Z. We got it late, and the configuration wound up being a nightmare to test. Our schedule compression is 0.67. We got crunched badly. Our test cases, we ran 892 out of 1,000. So we got close, but not all the way. For the new features that we were trying to cover, 2 areas are yellow, 6 are green. And that's it. I believe that's a lot more meaningful than, well, you know, 80% of our 2,000 test cases are automated, and we executed this. Then answer your question on automation, Phil?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a great answer. Thanks.
And I think
that executives will continue to be asking those questions, Phil, regardless of what we say here. But that's okay.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that, and I also think if you can provide a better, richer answer, if you're just willing to come out and say, yes, I think we're ready to release, and this is additional information that you need to know. That supports my yes, and it's not all good news, but I don't think we're in the range of, I can't make a case for no. If you're just willing to stand up and say yes or no and go digital, you will be light years ahead of other peers you have in QA. All right, I am going to hit the last one.
All right.
Let's see.
Rearview mirror.
Okay, Rearview Mirror Driver. So this is where you're really just haphazardly moving forward without knowing, what to expect. And I think that you need to be in a place where you can be predictive. So if you're spending all your time just kind of finding bugs instead of preventing them, you want to be investing some portion of your time in what are the root causes, what are the things that made these defects happen, and am I in a position to be able to make a difference on that? I think that you want to be able to be predictive in your metrics. So think to yourself, where are we going to be in 2 weeks? And write that down and see if you're correct. And then measure your ability to be correct as you look at the metrics today at predicting the future. And this will give you some sort of a baseline or a plumb line in order to not only know, okay, this is what's happening today by looking at stuff we did up until now, but we have insight into what's coming at us in the future and what should we do about it. So based on our time, I think that's probably where I want to end that one. And I am going to just summarize by telling people about the trifecta. And this is really like, what do I need to make sure that I'm reporting? So what have you done? What have you learned? And what still remains? So essentially, we tested this. What you learn is generally, these are defects that have come out of that testing process, and these are things we haven't tested yet. If you can explain those 3 things in your metrics and your reporting, you're going to have very powerful communication. Next, okay, am I doing tactical versus strategic? What I would say is that tactically, make sure you've got a standard process across your teams. And for strategic, make sure that you're able to look at things like, what is our year-over-year performance? In a company that I used to work for, we knew where we wanted to head strategically, and that was 97, 97, 250. We wanted to find 97% of the defects. We wanted to fix 97% of those that we found before the release, and we wanted to drive the cost of a function point of development to $250. That was our quality goal, and we measured it, and we got, while I was there, into the first 2. The last one that I would tell people about is BLUF. Make sure that you know what your bottom line is, what the communication that you are trying to tell people is. Come out with it. This is the headline, right? Boom. Tell people what they want to know up front. Don't let them dig for it. The last thing that you want to keep in mind is that less is more. People have trouble with brevity, and there are 3 things that get in the way of that. The habit of over-explaining, the habit of under-preparing, and the habit to completely miss the point. If you know your point, say it, let people understand it, and stop. That's what I've got, Phil. I'll turn it over to you and Rachel.
Thanks, Mark. That was great. I think the habit of under-preparing, I think that gets to us a lot. But that's probably a whole other webinar.
Thank you, Mark. It was so great having you. We did record this webinar, so registrants will receive an email with info on where to view the recording and slides. If you have any other questions, feel free to continue tweeting them to us at XBOSoft. Stay tuned for our next webinar, but until then, like us on Facebook and follow us on Google+ and LinkedIn for updates on future webinars, reports, and white papers. You can also check us out on our blog and download our most recent white papers at XBOSoft.com. Also, be sure to contact us with ideas for future webinars or questions regarding our services. Thank you and have a great day.